So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another 3v3 on the grassy plain. This seems to be becoming a little bit of a regular occurrence, which I don't mind at all. It's good to see more field battles, I think, because they can tend to work out in different ways to sieges, even if they aren't quite as cinematic, as it were. But this one was sent to me by Baconfish302, so good to see another replay from him. It's been a while, actually, since I think he... Well, he sent me a couple of replays more recently, but it's been a bit of a gap since the last batch that he sent me, so I'm glad to see that he's playing in games again. It's good to see, and he's playing as Harad, so we'll go through his army first of all, and obviously the first thing to note is he's got 2 units of Rumokill. Now, this is obviously a very big investment for Harad. It does mean that they have to cut down elsewhere, although as it stands in the current patch, Harad's low tier, sort of cheap, basic Haradrim units are actually pretty efficient for what they are. They obviously won't win any quality battles, but they can still do a job for you, and this allows you to obviously spend a little bit more on your elites. Usually people will go for a single unit of Rumokill though, and go for some Trollmen perhaps to sort of bulk out their infantry line, a little bit of a safer pick perhaps. Going for 2 Rumokill is obviously maybe a little bit more of a risky investment, because if people are expecting it, then there are ways and means that you can counter it. For example, crossbows and javelins, even though they might not decimate Rumokill to the same extent that they used to, they are still an effective tool for bringing them down. And obviously if you can trap Rumokill for a period of time, which they can get bogged down in enough mass, then you can do a fair amount of damage to them, and eventually all those hit points are going to wear off. But still, the main feature of this army is going to be the 2 units of Rumokill. Obviously on the front line he has to save money because of this big investment, so he has gone for several units of Haradrim archers and Haradrim spearmen, which obviously the Haradrim spears, in terms of quality, not great, but very, very cheap, numerous as well. And obviously that anti-cavalry bonus can be a bit of a problem for cavalry-heavy armies to try and get efficiency against. But really the Haradrim archers are the really efficient unit of the 2 here, because obviously cheap archers in the current patch, just extremely easy to use. You don't really have to think too hard about using them. You just put them on the front line, start them shooting. It doesn't really matter what they shoot. If they can attract enemy archer fire, that's even better for them. But obviously cheap archers will be made a little bit less efficient in the upcoming patch, because as it stands, obviously more expensive archers generally are just completely ignored in favour of archers like this because of how efficient they are. But for the time being, the Haradrim archers are a very good example of a low tier archer which can be very, very efficiently used. Looks like more Haradrim spearmen there. He's got some Hashari back here as well, which is an interesting choice. Hashari here have been brought instead really off the Trollmen or the dismounted Serpent Guard. Both of which obviously are the more tanky frontline alternative, both of which have shields. Obviously the dismounted Serpent Guard are not quite as strong, but they're not quite as expensive either. Obviously a pretty decent quality line infantry unit, but the Hashari here are classified as assassins, I believe. They do not have a projectile attack, but they are dual wielding, so they have a high amount of skill. They can do a lot of damage to enemy units in melee, and they can hide of course, but their big problem comes at mitigating missile fire. Which of course they are not particularly good at with their ranger-like attire. Back here we've got some Demons of the Desert, which actually is where the general's going to be hanging out. And obviously the demons, extremely powerful. I think in terms of thrown projectile units, they're probably the most damaging. If not the most damaging, then they certainly have the ability to send units flying. You might have noticed in previous patches, a lot of javelin projectiles would send units sort of flying all over the place because of the mass of the projectiles. The Demons of the Desert are now, I believe, the only javelin unit to have that attribute. And I believe they count as 2-handed spears in melee as well, which means unless a cavalry unit gets a very nice charge off on them, in sustained melee, the Demons of the Desert are going to be very, very damaging indeed. And I believe that's just about it. He's got another unit of Demons of the Desert over here actually, so he's definitely going for his elites to do most of the heavy lifting here, with these units over here just acting as a sort of disposable front line, as it were. And he's also got some Black Serpent bodyguards over here as well, without the general in it, so they can be used a little bit more freely. And obviously very, very quick, multiple HP lancers, very good off the charge. Not so great if they get caught in melee by decent melee cav or decent spear cav, but even so, they're fast enough that they can outrun most other opponents. His ally to the centre, let's go and have a quick look at them. Going to be Rudauer, played by Mark X and D. We've seen a little bit more of Rudauer in the past few replays, which is good to see. Some Coldfell Maidens, obviously Jav Cav, pretty decent in sustained fighting with other cavalry as well. And that's where you'll see the Coldfell Maidens used to blunt the effectiveness of enemy cavalry while playing as Rudauer. Using cavalry against Rudauer can be a little bit tricky anyway because of the amount of hand-thrown projectiles they have. If cavalry lingers too long, then they're going to get a fair amount of damage dealt to them, and the Coldfell Maidens of course are just a mounted javelin skirmisher. Over here on the front line again we can see the cheaper archers, the Dunman Hunters out here in front, very, very similar to the Haradrim archers, almost identical in terms of purpose really. low damage, but high volume is the name of the game here. And then here we have the front line of Rudauer comprised of Rudauer clansmen, which their skill is the main problem. You know, in a previous battle I did mention that their damage was low, but that isn't actually true. Their damage, when you factor in the Spear Malice, is still probably about 3 or 4, but their skill is only 1. So in sustained melee, they're still pretty garbage. But their primary purpose here is going to be supporting the pike line here, made up of the Hranadine pikes. And obviously they are going to be sort of backed up by the mass of the clansmen in places. Where the clansmen are not, however, there's also Rudauer swordsmen, which are a little bit better in sustained fighting than the clansmen, of course. They don't suffer the Spear Malice, and they have a little bit more skill than their spearmen brethren, Hranadine pikemen and clansmen, also on the side over there. Good to see the Attenmore Stroll Hunters. So there's a fair amount here of anti-cavalry capabilities, depending on who they're facing across the field. But obviously the main feature of the Attenmore Stroll Hunters is their ability to deal a lot of damage at range with those javelins, even though they're not half bad armoured spearmen in melee as well. A second skirmish line here made up of Rudauer marksmen. Their unique selling point is the fact they've got a lot of ammunition. They've got 3 quivers on them, of course, and that isn't just for show. They do have a lot of ammo. I think they have the most ammunition of all basic archers in the game at any rate. Obviously in a skirmish fight though, they're still not ideal, don't have the highest armour values and such. But still, over a long period of time, that extra ammo could come in very, very handy. He's also got some Witch Realm Enslavers back here, adding a bit of AP damage to his footbound units. And then as we have a look over here, another unit of cavalry. And this is the Hranadine Nobles as well, which obviously, as far as knights go, their unique selling point is the fact that they have AP in melee as well as off the charge. They do suffer for this in other areas, like they don't have as much armour, they don't have as much skill as other knights either. So you do have to pick your targets a little bit more carefully. For example, if you're going up against a unit of Noldorin Horse Lords, probably not a good idea to send your Hranadine Nobles charging directly into them, but if you're going up against a more heavily armoured form of cavalry, something like the Dragonwrath Warlords for example, absolutely the Hranadine Nobles are going to be the way to go for that, with their additional AP. And then the final blue player we have is going to be playing as Cardlan, and that is Mighty Eskimo 6. He's got some Tharbad Riders out here on the flank. Very good off the charge, the Tharbad Riders, very devastating there. But they are a little bit temperamental. You know, like most other Cardlan units, their morale is not great, so you do need to keep them moving. Most Lancers in general, you want to keep moving anyway, but the Tharbad Riders doubly so, because they're very, very good if you get them rolling, but they are also quite easy to lose if you misuse them. Also here on the front line, once again, we can see the lower tier archers coming out in force, the Greenwatch Garrison archers again, very, very similar story to the Dunman Hunters and the Haradrim archers. Low tier, low quality, but high volume. And we can see the Cardlan phalanx in effect here, very similar to how Arthedain does their business, a mix of Greenwatch Garrison spearmen, which are terrible in melee, but make a very good tar pit and meat shield, backing up the Greenwatch Garrison footmen, which are good cheap pikemen. You know, for their cost, as long as you can keep their formation intact and their pikes facing towards the enemy, they can do a very decent job for you indeed. Full phalanx as well. Backing them up, we've got some Minisker Ritalin swordsmen, so if things start to get a little bit more hairy on the front line, if they need more killing power, the swordsmen can be brought in. Good armour values as well. Cardlan, they cannot upgrade the armour of their mainline infantry like Arthedain and Gondor can, but still, the Minisker Ritalin swordsmen are still pretty decent, but you've got to watch that morale as Cardlan. Back here we've also got some Tharbad Warhammers, so very similar to the Witch Realm Enslavers in their ally to the left's army, their left at any rate. Tharbad Warhammers obviously AP, multiple HP shock troops. Back here, guarding the rear, we can see some Menotar Romen Guardians. Obviously I've said in the past they are my favourite Cardlan unit for good reason. Very good crossbow halberdier hybrids, obviously very good at zoning out cavalry, but also dealing damage to just about any armoured target they perceive. Pretty expensive though, that's where the general's hanging out as well. Some Wardens of Tyr and Gorthad here at the back, which are a pretty good morale buffing unit, which they might need actually on the front line. A lot of these lower tier units could be in danger of breaking, depending upon whom they're facing. And then we've got some cavalry as well as the Dunedain commanders out here, the Dunedain commanders without the armour upgrade. So just some melee cavalry riding with another unit of lance cavalry. The Dunedain commanders a little bit higher quality than the Tharbad riders. More willing to stick around in melee as the Dunedain are, but even so, they are still lance cavalry. You want to keep them moving, want to keep them charging. Now for the red team, we have Fallen Morningstar playing as Linden, so this could be a little bit hairy for Cardlan, all things considered. Obviously we've got some Wardens of Harlington out here on the flank, a mix between bow cavalry and spear cavalry, so could be a pretty tricky proposition for Cardlan's cap, but also the fact that these horse skirmishers could try and whittle down Cardlan's lines. We'll see if Cardlan's skirmishers have got enough spunk in them to stand up to a peppering from Linden's archer forces. Also got some Harland Guard here on the front line. Actually, it looks as though Fallen Morningstar has gone for a little bit more quality on his archer line. Usually you see more Fallen archers because they're a bit cheaper, but the Harland Guard are certainly better. Obviously they double as spears in melee, so if we see a frontal charge from that Cardland cavalry, it's unlikely to go too well for them. Back here we do have the Fallen pikemen just backing them up, so more anti-cavalry. Back here some Fallen Marines, even more anti-cavalry actually with the javelin spear hybrids, but Linden here could be in danger of not actually having enough straight up killing power to cut their way through Cardland quickly enough. Because we've got some more Fallen Marines over here, although it looks like cavalry is going to be Linden's primary focus here. Their general's going to be in the Noldorin Horse Lords, which are going to make mincemeat of anything Cardland has brought on horseback. Anything they could bring on horseback, actually. And some Mithlon Lancers over here, 2 units of them, Javelin, Lance, Cavalry hybrids, and honestly with the lack of crossbows of Cardland, all of this cavalry could prove to be a real problem as the battle goes on. Now for the middle red team army we have Isengard, played by Savage Paradox. He's got his Uruk-hai archers out in front, which actually are not quite as numerous as the Dunman Hunters, so we'll see how well this fight goes. The Uruk-hai archers should be of slightly higher quality, we shall see. Isengard's line is actually kind of similar here to Rudauer's line in the sense that it's going to be a mix of pikes and infantry. The Uruk-hai pike and infantry, of course, classic combination. Overall, probably of higher quality than the Rudauer Swordsman Randanine pike line, but also Rudauer are going to have more numbers on their front line, which is perhaps a good thing then that Isengard have got these Dunlanders just ready to back the line up as well. Obviously they're not likely to win any prizes for quality in melee, but just being here for the numbers in this case will be a very useful thing for them. Warg Riders as well, the AP on the Randanine Nobles is not going to help them at all against Isengard's cavalry force here. The Wargs are going to be all too pleased to see that the knights they're facing have got a slightly different focus to the rest. Some Uruk-hai Berserkers here as well. And then back here we have the mighty champions of the White Hand. In terms of anti-cavalry on the field today, there is bound to be nothing which is quite as strong as the champions, so Rudauer's cavalry force really needs to be careful. There's also some Uruk-hai crossbows here at the back, as well as some more wargs. And then finally we saw Rune over here previously, which I believe, yep, is played by Master Blaster. So he's got some Eastron Hunters out here on the flank, again extremely similar to the Haradrim archers that we've seen previously. He's spread his forces out a little bit more, so he's got some Eastron Clansmen as well as some Eastron Guard back here, just a secondary line. On his main line, however, he's got 2 units of Scion Rim either side of his central skirmish line, which is made up of Variag Mercenaries and Balchoth Tribesmen. I'm actually a little bit concerned here that he's gone for too many skirmishers, because he's certainly not going to be able to cover them from the Mumakil. And as time goes on, the Haradrim numbers might be too much for him to bear, so some more Scion Rim. More Eastron Hunters, Clansmen and Clan Guard, or just Eastron Guard I should say. Some Horse Archers as well, which are unlikely to be too useful against this sort of Haradrim army, I must say. And then over here we can have some Variag Mercenary Riders again, but also the Calm Walls Dragon Knights, which again, that's another knight unit on the field today. And the Black Serpents are certainly going to want to steer clear of the Calm Walls Dragon Knights. The only knight unit which is tankier than these guys would be the Knights of Illuminus from Arthedain. So without further ado, let's begin. So, based on Harad's army, I'm going to imagine he's going to be fairly aggressive with his Mumakil here. I can only imagine that the Rudauer-Isengard fight is going to turn into a long, drawn-out skirmish fight, at least until one side starts to win. At which point someone is going to be forced into some rapid recalculations. Haradrim archers already being fired upon by a litany of runic skirmishers, but the problem here that Rune are going to have is they're not going to be able to cover every angle of attack. And you can see already the Mumakil are charging forward with reckless abandon, and the Eastron Hunters immediately taking a beating from the Mumakil, bisecting the lines there. There's also the Black Serpents here, which are probably going to follow them in. Mumakil also on the other side. Now it is worth saying, the Sapphire Bladesmen do have the throne property, so they are still a hard counter to Mumakil, but they are also immediately being run down by the Mumakil. The Mumakil need to do their damage quickly though, because I do feel as though eventually all of this skirmish power that Rune have, especially in their javelins, is probably going to have a pretty nasty effect. So this fight over here could be decided pretty quickly, honestly. The Hashari have also come forward though, with the Mumakil being the primary focus for all of the runic skirmishers. The Hashari have been able to get into melee without any sort of problems, and they're now going to absolutely rip their way through Balchoth Tribesmen. There you can see the power of the Sapphire Bladesmen immediately bringing down one of the Mumakil, and they are shaken. But if they do start running amok, they are already within the runic lines, so honestly at this point Baconfish has already got his Mumakil where he needs them to be doing the damage. The Balchoth Tribesmen trying to fight, but at this point you can also see the Harajam are moving forward, they're very numerous infantry. The Hashari are in here. They need to be pretty careful though, because they're getting swamped by Eastron clansmen. Just over here we can see the Snaga skirmishers from Isengard trying to provide some support. The Black Serpent bodyguard continually charging into the runic lines, and it's already pandemonium over here. So a very, very good start, I think, from Harad, because while the Mumakil will probably eventually fade out, you've got to remember that Harad still have their Demons of the Desert in reserve, which is going to make the use of something like the Carmel's Dragon Knights pretty difficult. Where are the Dragon Knights? Well, they're over here. The Hashari are still pursuing the Scion Rim. They need to come back to the main fight, I think. These Mumakil causing all sorts of damage, and again, this is exactly the sort of army which the Mumakil are going to enjoy fighting. The only danger to them would be the Javelins. Harad doing very well against Rune here, but too many skirmishers here, really. Too many archers. Archers are not going to be able to do damage quickly enough to Mumakil to bring them down. If they instead had foregone the Variag mercenaries they had on the front line, Master Blaster was clearly very keen to have the skirmish advantage over Harad, which if they bring nothing but Haraj marchers is difficult to do, which is probably why he overcommitted on his archers here. But if he had foregone them and gone for some Eastron crossbows instead, because some sustained crossbow fire can do a lot of damage to Mumakil and bring them down pretty efficiently. Meanwhile, let's go and have a look on the other side of this battle over here, and you can see the Noldorin Horse Lords from Fallen Morningstar charging right into the front of Mighty Eskimo's archers, and that is exactly the sort of thing that he wants to be doing, catching out these archers. And again, it's very similar to the last 3v3 we saw on this map actually, where the Gondorian player sent his skirmishers far too far in front of the rest of his army, and it allowed the opposing cavalry to just pick them off one by one. Having said that, the rest of Cardlin's army is going to be difficult to break down. I would still back Lyndon in this fight, but Cardlin's army is going to be fairly awkward for Lyndon to face and deal with cost effectively, which at this point the red team is going to need to think about doing, because Rune are in disarray. At this point they're just being slowly but surely hunted down. The Hashari in here providing some good melee support for the Harajan spears. If it were just Harajan spearmen, then the quality of Rune's infantry could still see them through in this sort of situation. But as it is, their infantry has been absolutely run over, and not all of Rune's infantry was of low quality either. Their Scion Rim were just smashed into the dirt. You can also see now that the Black Serpents are running around in the backlines as well. A lot of routing here from Rune's units, a lot of very healthy units routing off because of the fear of the Mumakil. Now that was probably not such a great idea from Baconfish, sending his Black Serpents into the Dragon Knights. 1-to-1 the Dragon Knights will easily win that. The Black Serpents definitely want to be focused around charging, fleeing Runic infantry units to make sure they don't come back, get more kills, make sure that Rune are going to continue to be a non-factor in this fight. Scion Rim shaken, and obviously the Loka units are actually much more difficult to break than other sort of standard infantry units from the kingdoms, the evil kingdoms of man. But I have to say the Hashari have done very well for themselves. Obviously the Mumakil acting as the lightning rod for all of the ranged skirmish fire, and it allowed the Hashari to get onto the front line without too many issues. And the Mumakil are still going to be alive into the late game, battered and bruised, but still alive. Meanwhile, you can already see actually that the red team are starting to rapidly rethink. Isengard is going to try and meet up with Lyndon, and at this point actually I'm surprised Mark XMD is not rapidly moving forward to try and make life a little bit more difficult for Isengard here. What have we got going on over here? Tharbad Riders charging forward. Oh, this is going to be grisly though, because the Wargs are over here. A bit of indecision there on the part of Mighty Eskimo, and obviously the Tharbad Riders, I've mentioned before how fragile they can be, so you definitely don't want to be sending them into the jaws of a unit of Warg Riders. I'm actually quite impressed, however, here how Cardlin are starting to move forward as a unit here. I think they see which way the wind is blowing, although they are going to need support from their allies very quickly. Mark XMD cannot continue to be as static as he's being, because if he is, he's going to be hanging his ally out to dry here. Well, there goes the Runic General, charging into the Demons of the Desert. How much damage did they actually do? These Demons of the Desert are actually pretty battered, but honestly the Dragon Knights might have been worth saving in this sort of situation. When he saw which way the wind was blowing, the Dragon Knight should probably have been cycled out with his Horse Archers, try and help out Isengard and their ally, but as it is, the Dragon Knights have been slowly but surely bled. Meanwhile, here we can see Isengard are moving forwards. The Wargs are in the back lines, the Manatar Roman Guardians are firing. They've got some Dunedain Rangers as well. those body-piercing projectiles. You can see now Rudauer are starting to make their way over. So at this point the name of the game for Cardland is going to be survival. Isengard and Linden, on the other hand, they need to be quick about this. They need to finish off Cardland quickly and efficiently. If they don't, then the red team are going to be in all sorts of trouble as the battle enters its final stages. And again, going pike to pike, Linden will win this fight, obviously, with 4 Linden pikes and the like going up against Greenwatch Garrison Footman. But some Warden's Valos Tyrion there as well. Perhaps a nice rear charge here coming in from the Noldorin Horse Lords. They've taken a few losses actually, so clearly the Minotaur Romen Guardians have been put to good use. Nice hammer and anvil there, but even so, I mean, these are spearmen. You don't want to leave the Noldorin Horse Lords in there for too long. And they're obviously acting as a real lightning rod for all of Cardland's skirmishers in the backlines here. But you can see Isengard is starting to spill in, so Rudauer absolutely needs to get their arse in gear and get over here and assist their allies, because at this point Cardland's side that is trying to hold back Isengard, well, there goes the Linden General. You can see here that Cardland are just sort of leaving a skeleton crew out here to try and hold back Isengard. Here come the Moomakill though. That's a really terrifying sight to see on the horizon. The Mithlon Lance, I'm a little bit surprised there's not more movement from them, but you can see here that rather quickly Cardland's army's starting to fall apart. Again, I feel as though Rudauer, when he saw what Cardland were doing, you know, even if you don't think it's a good idea, as an ally you need to sort of move to do what's best for your team, and I feel as though Rudauer needed to be a little bit sharper on the uptake rather than just allowing Isengard to move all the way over here before they started to move. I don't think it's going to end up being too much of a problem for the blue team. I'd still back them in the long run. Even so though, I mean, Cardland have been pretty soundly defeated by this combined force of Linden and Isengard, arguably more efficiently than Harad was able to deal with Brune earlier on. Here are the champions of the White Hand, which they're going to be a bit of a doozy to bring down. Units like the Franadine Nobles are not going to be sufficient. Here come the Rudauer units now though, although Rudauer clansmen with their lower skill unlikely to fare too well against Uruk-hai infantry. Isengard are now having... well, Isengard managed to finish off most of Cardland's units over here beforehand, so they are now going to be able to turn around and try and fight Rudauers approaching them. But this is going to be the issue here. The Moomakill obviously causing absolute havoc in the defensive lines of the red team. At this point these Mithlon Lancers need to get over here and start throwing their javelins into the Moomakill, because the Moomakill are damaged, and you can actually see that the Uruk-hai crossbows are starting to bring them down. The Moomakill are also running amok. Here come the Franadine Nobles getting a decent charge into the side of the Uruk-hai infantry, trying to support their Rudauer clansmen, although the Uruk-hai berserkers are also over here, so those clansmen are unlikely to be loving life for too long. Ferodrum javelins coming over here from Rudauer as well. All of these javelins could prove to be a bit of a saving grace. The Dunlanders obviously, looks-wise, fairly similar to Rudauer, so they're going to blend in a little bit. The Uruk-hai crossbows proving to be a real pain for these Haradrim Moomakill. Rudauer clansmen. There's also the Hashari coming over here from Baconfish, hunting down the Uruk-hai archers. There's actually still some runic units left alive as well, so Rune is still a presence on the battlefield with their very battered units of horse archers. The Balchol Sapphire Bladesmen are still fairly significant, even though there are only 12 of them. They're trying to finish off this unit of Black Serpents. A shower of javelins coming in there to the Haradrim unit. Finally now the Mithlon Lancers are starting to move. The bulk of the Linden army is actually still alive. And they're going to charge into the Minotaur Romen Guardians. A nice charge as well, good connection. They need to be careful though, because if they stay in melee for too long against the Minotaur, that's going to be anti-cavalry damage they take. The AP would also be helpful against the champions, although they are fighting fairly outnumbered here. The Franadine Nobles are coming over here now. They probably don't want to take a fight with the champions of the White Hand, especially when they're outnumbered. What have we here? Some more Linden units are coming over here now. Isengard's still fighting off against Rudauer. There's some runic units routing in here. There's all sorts going on now. There's a lot of chaos in the backlines as Harad and Rudauer are starting to move as one. All of the hand-thrown projectiles. Harad General lost to Dunland clansmen. I think with all of the javelins that both Harad and Rudau are brought though. That's going to be a bit of a problem here, although Rune still proving to be a presence in this battle, though as soon as I say that they rout in the presence of the Reforged javelins with their spiked maces. Here in the middle though, a combined push from both Isengard and Linden. Actually Linden, they have now sort of tilted their army to face this way, but Linden need to fully commit as well, because otherwise Isengard are just going to get themselves killed slowly but surely at the hands of all these javelins, and then numbers wise it's going to be looking pretty grim for Linden. So they need to move together. There's still a few Cardland units left alive as well, which is good to see. Crown nobles regrouping over here with the pikes. What have we got over here? Still some Minotaur Romen Guardians still holding their ground. The rest of Linden's forces just waiting. It's a really chaotic battle this at this point in time. Really, this is the closest thing we've got to a front line over here, primarily made up of Isengard units. Dunman pikemen, now the Uruk-hai infantry, trying to push their way through. But at this point I think Isengard have pushed too far. And now a combination of all of these lower quality archers and higher quality javelins are going to start to have a real impact on them as they move forward. Was that and more Stroll Hunters just took a volley, I think from the crossbows, based on the amount of blood spray that came out of them. Still some Greenwatch Garrison footmen over here as well, supporting the Rudau clansmen. Going up against the Uruk-hai berserkers and some infantry. I just saw those floating corpses above the Mumakil then, that was a bit weird. There's still these 2 units of Mithlon Lancers, however, and the Champions of the White Hand. That's nothing to be sneezed at. But the main problem, I think, is going to be all of these hand-thrown projectiles. They do need to actually get their ammunition downrange for that to be true, though. Linden do need to keep cycle charging their cavalry if they're going to win this. Still this front line over here holding fast. But again, it is only Rudau clansmen. Their lack of skill and the spear malice is going to be a real problem against Uruk-hai infantry, which are a very, very solid mainline infantry unit. Here come the Champions of the White Hand into the back lines, getting into the archers. There's some Harajam spears back here, but they are not going to be sufficient to take a charge from the Champions of the White Hand in particular. All these archers, however, are going to be continuing to pepper down what remains of the red team. Still some Demons of the Desert over here as well, as Rudau are now starting to squeeze in from the side with some Witch Realm enslavers and the Franadine pikemen as well. And the Franadine pikemen are much more high quality than the Dunman pikes. Certainly able to at least go toe to toe with the likes of the Uruk-hai pikes. They might not necessarily win that fight, especially with the kind of support both units often tend to get. But they are no pushovers. Here come some Linden units moving forward as well, actually getting caught on a few Cardland spearmen. Here come some Demons of the Desert out wide as well, Wardens of Harlenden. Still some Minotaur Romen Guardians, so still all the players still have an army of some description left. This push in the middle didn't go all that well. 4 Linden pikemen tried to follow the Uruk-hai infantry in, but still the Dunman pikemen holding the line. Really at this point this unit is going to prove to be a real problem for the blue team. The Champions of the White Hand causing havoc in the back lines, going after individual high quality targets like the Eton Moors Troll Hunters. What have we got going on back here? Dunman Hunters firing into blobs, trying to kill off what remains of the Elven Cavalry. There's still some 4 Linden Scouts as well, and obviously Scouts are hidden cav. You don't often see them because of how easy they are to kill. But they are the sort of thing in this the later stages of this game with the high charge bonus that they can deliver. Could be pretty handy, killing off these lower quality units of archers. Bit of a blob fight going on over here. These Rudau clans would have held the line for a pretty long time at this point, but more and more reinforcements are being added. The Ferrodrum Javelins getting charged by the Champions of the White Hand. Taking some close range axes, however, from the Trollshore Axe Throwers. Some spears coming in here as well. They need to be careful here, the Champions of the White Hand. They're a pretty important part of the red team's hopes of winning this. The Witch Realm enslavers have sort of pushed their way through into Linden's units. The AP won't really help them in this situation, but they have buckled the pike formation already. They're going to get some support from some lower quality pikes as well. This fight over here could prove to be pretty important, and Linden are losing it. The Franadine pikemen being supported by a lot of low tier spears at this point. Numbers will probably win the day over here. What's going on here? The Minotaur Romen Guardians continuing to fight the support of the Coldfell Maidens, trying to bring down these 4 Linden Marines. It's individual sort of units fighting individual units. There's not really been too much of a semblance of cohesive lines as the fight was joined over here. Wardens of Elos Tyrian, very good as rangers actually. They are technically dual wielding units. So in melee they are just a little bit more skillful. But they are also taking rear charges, and they're having to go up against pikes as well, which pikes are just going to hold them in place for a long period of time. There goes the Rudar General.
We must look to our own soldiers for victory now.
Again, these Witch Realm Enslavers have... I mean, they're right up in here in the pikes, but they are winning, nonetheless. And with all of the Rudar battles I've shown recently, the Witch Realm Enslavers have been involved in all of them, and have done pretty well in all of them as well, I must say. Even against units which maybe you wouldn't expect them to be all that efficient against. But yeah, I think slowly but surely, if we have a look at the percentage of kills, it's only a 3% differential, and you could argue that with the Elven quality the red team could still pull this out, but I think, based on the units I'm seeing that are left, I would probably back the blue team. But those Champions of the White Hand are a big plus point for the red team here at this point as well. Is that a rout? No, it isn't. Just pulling some units away. Coalfell Maidens over here. Mithlon Lancers. The Coalfell Maidens I think are going to try and blunt the charges of these Mithlon Lancers. Still the Rudar Marksmen, they will keep firing all day long with all their ammunition. That was a pretty tame charge from the Mithlon Lancers, but it's enough to rout that Rudar Clansman unit, and that could be a very key moment in this battle. Very close, very hotly contested. The problem is with all this cavalry, eventually you would imagine, and here the Forlinden Scouts made a bit of a misplay there, charging right into the Hranadine pikemen. Wardens of Elos Tyrian defeat seems certain against all of these pikes. Manatar Romen Guardians still alive, all of these Mumakil corpses dotting the field. The Witch Realm Enslavers continuing to slice their way through elves, with the support of some lonely Dunman pikemen. I don't know. Here comes some Uruk-hai infantry to complete a surround on the Witch Realm Enslavers, which, you know, that could be the sort of thing which this battle is decided on. I don't know, the red team could pull this out. That elven quality could come into play. Some Harajam archers still over here, the Hranadine pikemen going to be up against these Forlinden archers. But I'm not sure, those Champions of the White Hand, they are going to be real difficult to bring down at this point. They're so strong. I think the Rudar Marksmen just got routed as well. Indeed they did. Here come the Champions of the White Hand. Are they going to be going after the Manatar Romen Guardians? I think they are. Well, they certainly should be, because they're laying waste to the Wardens of Elos Tyrian. They pulled out their halberds though, although that was still a pretty nasty charge they just took. Still, the Champions of the White Hand don't want to stick around too long. That's one of the few units on the field at this point, alongside the pikes that the blue team have, that will be able to significantly damage the Champions of the White Hand. Granadine pikemen continuing to hold the line. Forlinden archers and pikemen not in big enough numbers anymore to bring down the shielded pikes. Those Harajam archers still have some ammunition as well, trying to pepper down the Champions of the White Hand. Mithlon Lancers are also over here. Whatever happened to the Manatar Roman Guardians? They're over here, trying to bring down the Wardens of Elos Tyrian.
Our army is tiring.
Yeah, here we can see the archers going to be singled out.
Our men flee. Rally them. And remember, an army of sheep led by a lion can defeat an army of lions led by a sheep.
Well, those Champions of the White Hand did do some damage to the Hranadine pikemen, but I'm not sure. I mean, at this point the cavalry has to really charge into pikes, and that's going to be real unhealthy for them. But Harad are gone from the fight. Again, this is risky for them. I mean, they are doing a lot of damage on the rear charges here, which could prove to be the difference maker. But these Mithlon Lancers, this could be game over for them. Although the Wardens of Elos Tyrian starting to turn this fight around. How are the Witch Realm Enslavers getting on? Victory still seems certain for them. Still, again, that percentage doesn't take into account routed units, which that might be the key thing that's missing here, because I feel as though the blue team have had a lot more routing going on than the red team. Early on with all that runic routing, you would imagine that it would be the other way around, but half-decent charge there into the Witch Realm Enslavers, but again, their AP damage. You can see that more of the champions are being brought down. It's going to turn into a pure melee fight because the champions of the White Hand have run out of steam. And these Mithlon Lancers as well, as soon as they keep charging into these Franodine Pikes, their fate is going to be sealed. It's real close, this. And counter charge there from... and there they go. Isengard finally destroyed. Could the blue team bring this over the line? Here come the Mithlon Lancers. They're really desperate to bring these Witch Realm Enslavers down and have done really very well considering they've been up against primarily lightly armoured Linden units, which isn't where they're going to be most efficient. They've still done a lot of damage. They've destroyed the cavalry that's come in to charge them. I think the blue team are going to have enough to pull this out. It's going to be close. I mean, the Warns of Alos Tyrion are probably going to win over here. Again, the Minotaur Roman Guardians are good in melee, but they have more of an AP focus. The Phalanx formations could be a little bit of a problem here, but I think the blue team have got this. Some Dunman Pikemen are shaken. They could complete the surround here on these 4 Linden Pikemen. That would probably be enough to rout them. These Witch Realm Enslavers proving to be real juggernauts here for Rudauer. Taking an awful lot of punishment, doing a lot of damage as well in return. And there goes a rout. So yeah, I think with that, now that the most elite unit left on the field has been freed up to be used elsewhere, these Franodine Pikes have been victorious over here. So yeah, the only bit of resistance left really, as you see floating corpses in the background there, are going to be these Wardens of Alos Tyrion, and they are not going to be able to slice their way through all that is left. Cardland still have units left, which is impressive considering how poorly their initial engagement went. And in the end, despite being a little bit slow on the uptake initially, when Isengard started to move to reinforce his ally, Rudauer certainly more than made up for that here in the late game by ultimately heaving his team across the line with a combination of his pikes and high damage units as well. The javelins and axe throwers also difficult to take stock of the damage they would have done throughout the fight, but Isengard in particular would not have liked going up against them. Here we go. The closing stages of this fight now. Charging in there to the Warns of Alos Tyrion. Defeat seems certain. Dead to the last man. And well played. Very, very close though. Have a look there. Just a 3% differential, and that doesn't take into account the routed units from both sides either. Obviously Rune routed off fairly early on.
Only by a sword's edge. This battle may have been any man's.
Yeah, it really could have. I feel as though that initial rush, obviously, from Harad went really, really well, because Rune clearly went for more of a skirmish approach, and against Mumakil that's not going to work unless a lot of those skirmishes are javelins and crossbows, and in the end, Baconfish did a good enough job of shutting down those runic javelins. They managed to get a couple of volleys off into the Mumakil, but ultimately not enough to bring them down. That would have been the risk with this build. Obviously, if those javelins had managed to land their shots, the Sapphire Bladesmen in particular, it could have turned pretty ugly for Harad. And if Harad had not beaten Rune so quickly, the same thing would likely have happened on the other side, where Cardland got double teamed and very quickly brought down, and then rapidly Rudauer would have found themselves trying to go 3 versus 1, which obviously would not have worked out for him. But as it is, Harad were able to win fairly convincingly against Rune, smashing their army to bits with the Mumakil. They still had a few things left Rune, but nothing that could really tilt the fight in the favour of the red team. Again, Cardland maybe a little bit too gung-ho with how quickly they moved forward, but once they did, Rudauer really should have followed suit to try and attack Isengard as they were moving over, rather than just allowing it to happen. But I do also feel as though Rudauer's play later on with how they organised their army, particularly the composition of it with how many pikes and how many hand-thrown projectiles there were, made it quite difficult for the cavalry advantage of the red team to really shine through. But let's have a look at what did the damage for Harad, as if we needed to know. Obviously the Mumakil getting in excess of 300 kills each, which is unsurprising. Obviously the Black Serpents getting over 200, the Demons of the Desert doing good between them as well, despite the fact they were the target of the runic cavalry, and even some of the low quality units like the Haradrim Spears doing pretty well for themselves, and the Hashari, one unit of Hashari getting nearly 150 kills, which considering the sort of the disarray of the initial runic lines is perhaps not too surprising. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. That was definitely a very close fight. Big thank you to Baconfish for sending this one in. Obviously it's always good to see some Mumakil action, which is, on the grassy plane in particular, always seems to be quite popular. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.